Hi, everyone. I'm Bruce Parker, real estate mentor, educator, licensed real estate broker, and director of Best School of Real Estate.
All right, so we're going to go to planning, zoning, and building ordinances next, chapter 24. Since the ancient times, they realized there was a need to properly lay out cities. And a couple years ago, I went to visit Pompeii, and I went to visit other cities in um, England and in Italy and in France that were thousands of years old. And they would lay out streets in perpendicular and parallel patterns. In Pompeii, they even did things like they had speed bumps. They would have blocks of rock that would prohibit an quick and easy passage of wagons through the city streets. You had to be real careful how you got through them. In Pompeii, they even had a sewer system for your urine, where all the urine in certain streets was diverted to the laundry, where they would then dilute the urine and boil it down and make ammonia out of it and use that to whiten their white clothes, their togas. So a lot of planning went into the city of Pompeii before it was destroyed by Mount Vesuvius. New Jersey realized at some point that it needed to have a body of law that all municipalities, whatever they call themselves, would behave the same. You know, you have towns, townships, cities, boroughs, hamlets in New Jersey. And so all of those were codified into one set of laws under the Municipal Land Use Act. The Municipal Land Use Act said, the important things it said was that every municipality has to have a planning board. The planning board has to be made up of 7 or 9 members. And that's a political number because it makes it easy to not have ties, because 7 or 9, and it's not such a big number that it's hard to, make that all happen. So 7 or 9 members on the planning board. The planning board is also responsible for creating a master plan, and they have to create a master plan every 6 years or readopt the old one. Step 1 is forming a comprehensive planning group. Is Phase 2 is orientation. Phase 3 is to formulate the mission, do the conceptual framework, lay out the objectives, have a comprehensive strategy, and then write the final master plan. So in every municipality, the municipality is busy creating master plans. And every 6 years, they have to readopt the old one or put out a new one. Now, if you go to the meetings with the master plans, you can get a good idea of what your municipality tells you what uses you're going to allow. One of the things that's really weird that's always on the test is part of the master plan is telling you what buffer zones they may require. Buffer zones are things, land uses they put in between two incompatible land users. So for instance, if you have a development and then you have next to it a factory, they would want you to put a buffer in between those two. They may want you to put a stand of trees. They may want to put a retaining pond. They may want to put a giant wall. So a buffer zone separates two incompatible or different uses. It's not a big deal, but it's always on the test. Table of contents of the Old Bridge Master Plan. Here's an example of a buffer zone. We've got houses and then a highway. They had to put a stand of trees in between. Here's another buffer zone. They had to put a retaining basin in between. Sometimes you have a piece of land. Again, in Highland Park, you need a 50 by 100 piece of land to build a house. What if you had a 100 by 100 piece of land? If you could divide it in two, you could build 2 houses. So if you want to divide it into 2, you do a minor subdivision. This is the application for a minor subdivision in freehold. If you wanted to do a minor subdivision, 1-page application, easy peasy. And as long as you were complying with the zoning rules, they'd have to let you do it. What if you were doing a major subdivision? I've got a lot for sale in South Brunswick, $7 million. That's 14.7 acres. And the way it stands now, they can only put about 7 houses on it. They want to make it so that they can put 72 houses on it. In order to make that a subdivision they could put that many properties on, they have to get a major subdivision. And that major subdivision would need an environmental impact statement. Very expensive to get that done. Next thing is your planning board and your zoning. Set up the zoning within your town. What different neighborhoods, what kind of properties can be built in them, commercial, residential, industrial. And they'll label all the zones, and every town has its different nomenclature for the different zones. They deal with things like setback lines, total lot coverage, impervious lot coverage, how much of your lot can not allow rainwater to seep into the ground, side and rear yard requirements, maximum height, minimum height, all things that your zoning might tell you. It also might tell you what you can use certain areas for. Hospital for H, perhaps, PO for professional office, perhaps. So all different types of uses that they may or may not allow. And the planning board kind of designs all those so they have the optimum use and the optimum enjoyment of all the residents of the municipality. Sometimes you have what's called a non-conforming use that's pre-existing, also known as a grandfathering. This is a picture of Englishtown Raceway in Englishtown. When I was a kid, back in the olden days, this was built and there was nothing else out there. No houses, nothing. It was way out in the sticks and nobody complained and it met the zoning. But as Middlesex County filled up, all around this filled up with houses and you would never be able to build a racetrack there again. But since this had been there before they changed the zoning, they can't force it out. It is a pre-existing non-conforming use. Pre-existing being part of the description that's very important because if they ever completely stop the use and just let it sit there vacant for a period of time, they lose their pre-existing classification and then they would have to meet current zoning and they would never be able to have it there. I always like on this particular slide to talk about this gentleman down here. He worked for me. His name was Tom Resco down in the corner. He was the starter at the racetrack. And with these funny cars, he would be the one who would stand there and monitor the Christmas tree and when they were ready to go. You can imagine how loud that was with that supercar engine shooing off that kind of exhaust, that flame. The reason I always bring Tom up, he was a great guy and he passed away last year. So I always want to say I remember him and he was a really good real estate agent and a really good starter at the racetrack. So again, that's Tom Resco. Next is the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Again, what happens if, let's say in Highland Park, you've only got a 45 by 100 lot and you need 50 by 100 and you want to build on it? You would go before the Zoning Board of Adjustment and you would ask for a variance. You're asking for the Zoning Board of Adjustment to vary their rules and allow you to build on it. Now, what happens if they turn you down? You go for an appeal and you ask them again, listen, I'm appealing to you guys. Please change the rules. What happens if they turn you down again? Now you go to a different court and you ask the court to force the town to make them amend their rules. That's called an amendment. You better have a good lawyer to do an amendment and you better have friends in the town because you're going to be making people mad at you. New Jersey, we've got a problem because we've got exclusionary zoning. In other words, rich people all live in one place, poor people all live in another. The places that rich people live tend to have better schools. And you can make all kinds of arguments as to why that is the case, but it is the case. And so many times, if you're poor, you don't have the choice to go to a really good school. Like if you're poor in Edison, you can't go to J.P. Stevens unless you live in 08820, and houses in 08820 are more expensive than 08817. So New Jersey found that the exclusionary zoning is a form of you are housing. Gee, my brain just went black. Discrimination. And they call it a disparate effect. If something that you do has a disparate effect and the effect of what you do causes discrimination, even though that's not what you were planning on doing, it's called a disparate effect, and therefore it is to be considered discrimination. So how did New Jersey deal with this stuff? Well, one way is they passed the Mount Laurel I Doctrine. In 1975, the Mount Laurel I Doctrine said that every municipality in New Jersey has an obligation to build low and moderate income housing. But builders are sneaky. And so they only said that builders have an obligation to build. They didn't say where. So for instance, in Westfield, they were going to build low and moderate income housing in a different town, not in Westfield. So the spirit of the law was to get more low and moderate income people into Westfield, but instead it just made houses for low and moderate income people in Plainfield. So it wasn't really accomplishing what they intended. So New Jersey went back to the drawing board and passed Mount Laurel 2. Mount Laurel 2 says every municipality has an obligation to build low and moderate income housing. And this law has become a monster to the bad, because now it is forcing towns all over to build low and moderate income housing. So who is going to build low and moderate income housing? Well, a builder. But a builder is only going to build low and moderate income housing if the town allows them to build regular housing at the same time. And so builders are getting able to force the zoning to allow for more densely packed houses, more houses in a smaller area, and give 10% of those new units to low and moderate income, but the other 90% are to regular income people. And it ends up having so much more people packed into a dense area. And they're forcing the towns where everybody has that not in my backyard mentality to create these kind of dense housing. And I don't believe that this is a good law. My wife says if there's too many laws in a state that you don't believe are good laws, you vote with your feet and move. And so someday, when it gets to be too aggravating to me, I'm on my way south. But for right now, I'm still in New Jersey. By the way, this Mount Laurel 2 decision is considered to be one of the best anti-discrimination laws in the country, and is one of the most significant civil rights cases since Brown versus the Board of Education, which said that we're not allowed to have separate but equal in schools. So we couldn't have segregated schools anymore. So that's a big deal. This Mount Laurel 2 decision is a big deal. A planned unit development. I'm going to get a listing in Saraville. It's in a planned unit development. A planned unit development is where a developer makes a compromise with the municipality, allows them to build dense housing, more houses in a smaller space. In return, the builder gives the town land for a park or for a retaining pond or for some other purpose. So they make a compromise as to the density of housing. And when you have a planned unit development, you're going to have a homeowners association, and you're going to have a list of covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Just sort of like you would have in a homeowners association in a condo. Another thing is municipalities have the right to create their building ordinances through building codes. They require building permits to make additions to structures. They may require a certificate of occupancy between resales, and they will always have a certificate of occupancy for new construction. Once all the construction is done and all the permits have been issued, then they'll issue a certificate of occupancy. A law in New Jersey says on a new construction, the builder must give the buyer a 10-year builder's warranty on new construction. And that 10-year builder's warranty covers systems and structures, not appliances, systems and structures. That 10-year builder's warranty that the state law says they have to give costs the builder between $3,000 and $5,000. So it adds to the cost of the house by $3,000 or $5,000. I always feel that they don't realize that whenever they pass laws that add costs to the people who are building houses, it adds costs to the people who buy them. And then people complain about the high cost of housing, and they really just need to kind of knock down some of the regulations.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you can get notified of what's new.